Welcome to the Knowledge Seeker channel. The channel is dedicated to exploring critical issues in the world. As such, the channel is not afraid to challenge existing facts, theories, and beliefs in order to contribute to the advancement of knowledge. Today's presentation is titled The Reasons Why Nigeria Hesitates to Fight Terrorists and Prosecute Terrorism Sponsors. Nigeria is facing a jihad. Introduction to the topic. Based on information perused from media reports, news, talk shows, and social media, it seems that millions of Nigerians, including the elites, still do not understand what is going on in Nigeria. As a result, they wonder why the federal government has been unwilling to declare a full-scale war to put an end to the incessant killings of Nigerians and the burning down of communities in many parts of Nigeria, especially in Benue, Borno, Kaduna, Katsina, Niger, Plateau, and Zamfara states. They wonder why the Nigerian police force, the military forces, Department of State Service, and other security agencies appear nonchalant and always wait until Nigerians are kidnapped and killed before they react, instead of being proactive in preventing the attacking, kidnapping, and killings. They wonder whether Nigeria is a sovereign state or not. They express their wonderment because they have never experienced a situation where herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists are rampaging through the country to cause mayhem, and the national government appears uninterested in stopping the mayhem. This is a picture of the Boko Haram fighters. As you can see, they are well equipped and ready to fight against Nigerian forces. Well, the reasons why the Nigerian government has been acting funny is because the Fulani herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists like the Boko Haram, Islamic State of West Africa Province, Ansaru, Lakurawa, and Mabuda group are engaged in a jihad sponsored by some of the most politically powerful individuals in the country and probably beyond. The groups are sponsored as part of the effort to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria. The desire to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria has been in the works for decades, but most Nigerians fail to pay attention. Thus, the purpose of this presentation is to accomplish the following goals. 1. Explain the reasons why the Nigerian government seems powerless to proactively fight and stop herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists who are terrorizing the country. And 2. Show the extent to which the Islamic North, especially the Fulanis, have gone in literally controlling and ruling Nigeria. To accomplish the goals of the presentation, the following arguments are made. 1. The Islamic North, led by the Fulanis, control Nigeria like a colony. 2. The Islamic North, led by the Fulanis, want to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria based on the order or command issued by Sir Ahmadu Bello. 3. The armed Fulani herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, Boko Haram, Ansaru, Islamic State of West Africa Province, Lakurawa, and the Mahmuda Group are the military forces designed to wage a jihad to eventually Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria. And fourth, Nigeria is unable to arrest those sponsoring terrorism because they are the political, military, and religious leaders of the Islamic North, which claims to own Nigeria and are allegedly sponsoring the jihad. Now, let's look at the Fulani Declaration of Intent to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria. 1. The foundational base for the justification to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria was laid down by Othman Dan Fodio when he successfully conquered the area known as Northern Nigeria, some parts of Chad, Niger, sections of Cameroon, and so forth in 1804 to establish the Sokoto Caliphate, which operated like an Islamic empire. The Sokoto Empire has been reduced to a state with the capital in Sokoto. To justify the destruction of the traditional Hausa states and the establishment of the Islamic Empire, Othman Dan Fodio declared, and I quote, "I have been given the sword of truth to defeat and conquer the enemies of Allah. I will establish the caliphate to rule over all, and Sokoto shall be its capital. It is either the pagans and unbelievers accept Sharia and the Quran, or they accept the sword." And I unquote. This statement implied that it is justifiable to destroy any non-Islamic state or religion in Nigeria. It further means that Islam cannot coexist with other religions, be it traditional African or Christianity in Nigeria. This is why some Islamists refer to adherents of traditional African religions and Christianity in Nigeria as infidels that cannot be tolerated by the Muslims. Please go back and reread the quotation or the statement made by Othman Dan Fodio. This is the picture of Othman Dan Fodio, the great-grandfather of, or the grandfather of Sir Ahmadu Bello. Since his grandfather had laid the foundation by indicating that non-Islamic religious and political systems cannot be tolerated, Sir Ahmadu Bello, the late Premier of Northern Region, declared and commanded that action be taken to accomplish the foundational wish of Othman Dan Fodio. Hence, he declared without mincing words, and I quote, "We, the people of the North, will continue our stated intention to conquer the South and to dip the Quran in the Atlantic Ocean after the British leave our shores." And I unquote. This is a declaration of war to spread Islam throughout Nigeria. So if anybody pretends, then the person is deceiving him or herself. This is pure declaration of war on Nigeria. To reinforce the declaration of war, he stated in 1961, and I quote, "The new nation called Nigeria should be an estate of our great-grandfather Othman Dan Fodio. We must ruthlessly prevent Again, I repeat, we must ruthlessly prevent a change of power. We must use the minorities in the north as willing tools and the south as a conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us, and never allow them to have control over their future. And I unquote. Again, this is a total declaration of war to Islamize Nigeria. There's no other way you can look at it. This statement shows that the Muslims must wage war in Nigeria until the entire country is Islamized, the way his grandfather Uthman Danfodio did in establishing the Sokoto Caliphate. This is the picture of Sir Ahmadu Bello, the former premier of the northern region that was killed in the military coup of January 15, 1966. Now, let's look at the issue of whether Britain handed over Nigeria to the Islamic North led by the Fulanis. The reason Sir Ahmadu Bello openly declared a religious war to Islamize Nigeria is due to the belief that the British handed over Nigeria to the Islamic North, hence the Fulanis own Nigeria. This prompted Sultan Ibrahim Dasuki of the Sokoto Caliphate in 1992 to say that, and I quote, "This country was given to we Northerners by the British to rule. When they left, the understanding between us was that the North would always lead and rule Nigeria." As indicated by a former British colonial officer in Nigeria, Mr. Harold Smith, Britain preferred the North to rule Nigeria. He explained, and I quote, "When we assessed Nigeria, this was what we found in the southern region: strength, intelligence, a determination to succeed, well-established history, complex but focused lifestyles, great hope and aspirations. The East is good in business and technology. The West is good in administration and commerce, law and medicine. But it was a period we planned our agenda to give power at all costs to one region. Our mission was to accomplish by destroying the opposition on all fronts. The West led in the fight for independence and was punished for asking for freedom." And I unquote. Let's look at the rationale for a jihad. Thus, Britain created the impression that it handed over Nigeria to the Islamic North, and many northern Islamic people strongly believe that they own Nigeria and are supposed to rule the country. Since Nigeria is made up of ancestralists, Christians and Muslims, and it is multi-ethnic with about 300 to 4 ethnic groups, some Islamists like Sir Ahmadu Bello believe that the only way to effectively own the country is to wage a war, that is a jihad, and subdue the other Nigerians to the will of Islam, like the way his grandfather did. This is why since 1960, the Islamic North has experienced the rise of many Islamic groups intended to spread Islam in Nigeria. They include the following: 1. The Jamaatul Izalatul Bidia wa Ikamal Sunnah. 2. The Izala Society was the first to advocate for a militant transformation of Islam in northern Nigeria. Note, the Izala Society split into the Equanist Quadbus militant movement and the Mododist movement. The Equanists advocated for the overthrow of un-Islamic systems. Three, the Matasine uprisings in the 1970s. 4. The Boko Haram, founded in 2002. 5. The Islamic State of West African Province, which broke away from the Boko Haram movement. 6. Fulani herdsmen. 7. Ansaru militant group. 8. Lakurawa militant group. And 9. The Mahmuda militant group, which attacks local communities in Kwara State. The implementation of the Sharia. As part of the effort to Islamize Nigeria, 12 northern states implemented the Sharia Islamic law without even seeking national legislative approval for such a law in a secular state. The northern governors felt that they own Nigeria and can do as they wish wherever they want to. The Sharia was implemented while a southerner, Chief General Olusegun Obasanjo, was the civilian president of Nigeria between 1999 and 2001. They did so to show that they own Nigeria. The 12 states were and are Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Kebbi, Niger, Sokoto, Yobe, and Zamfara. Now, let's look at the northern leadership response to the rise of militant Islamic groups in Nigeria. Perhaps due to the inspiration of Osman Dan Fodio and Sir Ahmadu Bello, the religious, political, and military leadership of the Islamic northern Nigeria has never been forthright in condemning the rise of militant Islamic movements in Nigeria. Instead of serious condemnation, they tend to support such eruption of Islamic jihadism. They probably do so because Sir Ahmadu Bello had commanded, as I stated earlier or quoted earlier. So again, I quote again. The new nation called Nigeria should be an estate of our great-grandfather Osman Dan Fodio. We must ruthlessly prevent a change of power. We must use the minorities in the north as willing tools and the south as a conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us, and never allow them to have control over their future. And I unquote. Let's see the organized attack on President Goodluck Jonathan. Thus, in realization of the fact that the national security of Nigeria was in danger, President Goodluck Jonathan and General Azubuike Ihe-Jirika, the Chief of Army Staff, decided to wage a serious war to clip the wings of Boko Haram between 2010 and 2014 by unleashing the Nigerian army to go after them. In addition, President Jonathan also hired the services of a South African mercenary force known as the Specialized Task, Training, Equipment and Protection of the Executive Outcome Organization in 2015, when some supporters of Boko Haram realized that President Jonathan was seriously committed to annihilating the Boko Haram. They became desperate and insinuated that the Christian South was bent on destroying the Islamic North. General Jirika noted the effort to malign him by saying, and I quote, "When we commenced operations in Maiduguri against Boko Haram terrorist sect, text messages were sent round to the fact that the chief of army staff has deployed a general of Igbo extraction to avenge the killings of Igbos during the Civil War." And I unquote. I think these messages were sent in order to corrupt the minds of the northern masses to hate President Jonathan and General Jirika. This is President Jonathan. This is the picture of Lieutenant General Azubuike Jirika, the Chief of Army Staff under President Jonathan, who was waging an effective war against Boko Haram, and northern leaders started mounting campaigns against him and President Jonathan. General Jirika's statement showed that the leadership of the Islamic North supported the jihadists and did not want the federal government to destroy them. Hence, Major General Muhammadu Buhari warned against an attack on Boko Haram by saying, and I quote, "The federal government stopped clamp down of Boko Haram insurgents, saying Niger Delta militants were never killed or properties belonging to them destroyed," and I unquote. This is the picture of Major General Muhammadu Buhari, who eventually became the president of Nigeria. Then he, that is General Buhari, added, and I quote, "An attack on Boko Haram was an attack on the North," and I unquote. This meant that the northern religious, political, and military leadership was in total support of Boko Haram in waging war to Islamize the country. Therefore, President Jonathan's effort to defeat the organization, that is to defeat the Boko Haram, was tantamount to defeating the Islamic North, because the leadership of the Islamic North closely identified with the aspirations of Boko Haram. Hence, another prominent northerner, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, who eventually became the Minister of Information in Buhari's administration, decried President Jonathan's effort to proscribe the Boko Haram and Ansaru by saying, and I quote, "The recent proscription order against Boko Haram and Ansaru, desirable as it may be in tackling the terrorist organizations, violates the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria by stifling the press and tampering with the fundamental human rights of Nigerians. And I unquote. Thus, Alhaji Mohammed viewed the violent activities of Boko Haram and Ansaru as freedom of expression, freedom of press, and fundamental human rights. Is that not interesting? Very, very interesting indeed. Again, showing that Islamic leaders in the north support the jihadists. President Buhari's Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, Isa Ali Pantami, allegedly referred to Boko Haram as, and I quote, our Muslim brothers, and I unquote, and decried the Nigerian military's effort to contain the organization by saying that Boko Haram's fighters were being, and I quote, killed like pigs, and I unquote. Then he allegedly added, and I quote, he is always happy when infidels are massacred, I unquote. This means again that the leaders of the Islamic North are in support of Boko Haram, Ansaru, and other jihadist groups who are carrying on a revolution to Islamize Nigeria. In desperate attempt to stop President Jonathan and Lieutenant General Ejirika from continuing to wage war against Boko Haram, northern Islamic leaders who support Boko Haram even accuse the duo of violating human rights of northern citizens. Hence, Sharon Fali Hacham wrote, and I quote, I expect that by now a powerful coalition of northern leaders should hold a world press conference and declare that they are being destroyed systematically through a well-orchestrated state-sponsored terrorism, and should raise a powerful delegation to visit world leaders and raise the same issue, and finally take the matter to the International Criminal Court of Justice and secure some arrest warrants, and I unquote. So they were basically making effort to make sure that either President Jonathan, General Ejirika, and other military officers were arrested for waging war against Boko Haram. Determined to stop President Jonathan, 12 northern states governors went to the US to seek support to remove President Jonathan as the president of Nigeria. Admiral Murtala Nyako allegedly read a memo cataloging offenses he believed President Jonathan had committed and wanted him removed as president. Perhaps due to the meeting, a plan was put in place to remove President Jonathan as president. Eventually, to prevent him from derailing the effort to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria, President Jonathan was removed from power through a rigged election on March 28, 2015. This is the picture of former Governor Murtala Nyako. He was an admiral in the Nigerian Navy. So a powerful northern Islamic leader. See, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, an Islamist, became president of Nigeria. Let's see how that went. The rigged election led to the supposed defeat of President Jonathan, thereby enabling Major General Muhammadu Buhari to take over as the president of Nigeria. He did the following on taking over. 1. he terminated the South African mercenary force that worked with the Nigerian military to retake most of the local government areas that Boko Haram had occupied in Borno State before the election of March 2015. 2. He removed Lieutenant General Kenneth Minima, who led the effort to retake the areas occupied by Boko Haram. 3. He slowed down the war against Boko Haram. This enabled Boko Haram to regroup and reinforce its forces to fight another day. This is the picture of Lieutenant General Kenneth Minima, the last chief of army staff during Jonathan's administration that was leading the war to destroy Boko Haram. Fourth, he recruited mostly Fulanis and Muslims into critical national security positions. 5. He almost turned Nigeria into an Islamic state through open discrimination against southern and central Nigeria and the ancestralists and Christians. 6. Fulani herdsmen went on a war path, terrorizing, killing people, and destroying farming communities. 7. The Boko Haram split into two groups, thereby giving birth to the Islamic State of West Africa province. 8. Then Ansaru jihadists joined the jihad. 9. Under President Buhari administration, thousands of students were kidnapped in the north. The kidnapping of students during this administration increased threefold. 10. Determined to spread the Fulanis around Nigeria, President Buhari proposed bills to establish Fulani cattle colonies, ranches, and roga throughout Nigeria. 11. He also proposed a national water resource bill to nationalize the ownership and management of rivers in Nigeria. And 12. He refused to order the military to engage fully in fighting the jihadist groups. The failure enabled jihadism to spread. Now, let's look at the claim of Fulani ownership of Nigeria. Thus, President Buhari came very close to fulfilling the dreams of Sir Ahmadu Bello. Hence, during his 8 years in office, the Fulanis became the major power-wielding group in Nigeria. After decades of spreading the narrative that Nigeria belongs to them, many political and military elites in the south and central Nigeria started to believe the Fulanis and allowed them to act as the owners of Nigeria. So in this case, one could say that southern and central Nigerians allowed themselves to be led by the Fulanis. This is why that is the Fulanis, dominate the political, judicial, legislative, law enforcement, and military branches of government in Nigeria today. The Nigerian armed forces have the capability to end the Fulani herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists like the Boko Haram, the Islamic State of West Africa province, Ansaru, Lakurawa, and the Mahmuda group, if given the full authority to do so by the political leadership of Nigeria. However, the Fulanis who control Nigeria through their alliance with Britain do not want the Nigerian military to be fully deployed because they have a goal to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria. This is why the Nigerian military sits on the sidelines while the jihadists and herdsmen roam the country to inflict death and destruction as part of a drawn-out process to subdue the country. Since they convince themselves that they have successfully become the masters of Nigeria after the British, the Fulanis expect other Nigerians to play and interact based on their strategic playbook. They demonstrate their supposed ownership of Nigeria in various ways. 1. They determine who becomes Nigeria's president. 2. No Southerner or Central Nigerian can become the president of Nigeria without the approval. 3. They determine both domestic and foreign policies of Nigeria. 4. They made Nigeria to be a member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, even though Nigeria is a secular state. 5. They have strong influence in directing the affairs of the Nigerian military. 6. The Sultan of Sokoto is regarded as the unofficial head of state of Nigeria. So almost all southern and central Nigerian politicians always troop to Sokoto to consult with the Sultan before they do anything. 7. That is, the Fulanis believe that they should rule Nigeria because they own it. And 8. The Nigerian legal system treats the Fulanis and Muslims differently from other Nigerians. A. This is why Boko Haram members who surrendered or captured are treated as repentant fighters and recruited into the Nigerian army, regardless of the crimes they have committed. B. On the other hand, Nnamdi Kanu, who is being detained and tried for crimes bordering on terrorism, with the case being postponed unnecessarily, and he has not been released. C. Likewise, while Charles Oka was sentenced to life imprisonment for the alleged bombing in Abuja, Fulani herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists are allowed to roam free, kill, and destroy with little or no consequences. 9. In short, the Fulanis and the leadership of the Islamic North regard the ongoing violence carried out by the jihadists as a secret war to Islamize Nigeria. This is a picture of repentant Boko Haram fighters. This is a policy Nigerian government adopt to rehabilitate captured and surrendered members of the Boko Haram. Due to the perception by many Muslims in Nigeria that they own the country, former Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State openly informed Nigerians that Fulanis in other parts of the African continent can move freely into Nigeria and settle. He did not care about the feelings of the more than 300 other ethnic groups that make up Nigeria. Hence, Sheikh Ahmed Gumi insisted that the government should negotiate and grant amnesty to herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists, regardless of the crimes they commit or they have committed. Sheikh Gumi reacted angrily when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu appointed Nyesom Wike, the former governor of Rivers State, as the minister of the Federal Capital Territory. He criticized the appointment by saying that Abuja belongs to Northerners and Muslims. Hence, someone from the Niger Delta South-South, a Christian, should not have been appointed as a minister of the Federal Capital Territory. This is despite the fact that Abuja was built with money from the Niger Delta South. This is the picture of Sheikh Gumi. Now, let's look at a preference for Muslim presidential ticket for Nigeria. In other words, some northern Islamic leaders would prefer Nigeria to be ruled only by Muslims. Strongly believing that the Islamic North, led by the Fulanis, own Nigeria, some prominent northern politicians and religious clerics have been insisting on having a Muslim presidential ticket, even though the country is made up of ancestralists, Christians, and Muslims. Due to the insistence that a Muslim ticket is preferable, when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima ascended the presidential throne, former Governor Nasser El-Rufai of Kaduna State openly said, and I quote, "What we are able to achieve in Kaduna has now been achieved in Nigeria. There is no liar that can say he will do politics of Christianity and win the election. So, if we keep bringing Muslim tickets, everything will go smoothly for us Muslims." And I unquote. He was basically saying, ignore the traditionalists, ignore the Christians, and simply go for Muslim ticket, because that was what he did as a governor of Kaduna State. Even though Kaduna State is a multi-religious state, he decided to go for a Muslim ticket as a governor of the state. He basically informed Nigerians that the Islamic North wants Muslims to rule. Now, let's look at the warnings of the danger of Fulanization and Islamization in Nigeria. Two very courageous Nigerians who recognize the reasons why the Nigerian armed forces have not been fully mobilized even after 10 years of unrestrained violence perpetrated by herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists like the Boko Haram, Islamic State of West African Province, Ansaru, Lakurawa, and Mahmuda Group are 1. Lieutenant General Theophilus Danjuma, former Chief of Army Staff, and 2. Commodore Kunle Olawumi, a former Director of Military Intelligence in Nigeria. So let's see what they say, these two patriotic Nigerians say about the situation in the country. 1. Lieutenant General Danjuma warned Nigerians about the danger of Fulanization and Islamization by saying openly that the Nigerian army is colluding with herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists to kill Nigerians. Therefore, he suggested that Nigerians should arm themselves to avoid being killed. 2. Commodore Kunle Olawumi boldly informed the world that there are some Nigerians who want to Islamize Nigeria, like the way the Taliban did in Afghanistan. He added that Nigeria has a list of those who sponsor terrorism, but it does not want to release the list and prosecute the culprits. He explained, and I quote, You remember this Boko Haram issue started in 2012, and I was in the military intelligence at the time. We arrested those people. My organization actually conducted interrogation, and there the suspects mentioned names. I can't come on here and start mentioning names of people that are presently in government that I know that the boys that were arrested mentioned. Some of them are governors now, some of them are in the Senate, and some of them are in Aso Rock and are on quote. Basically was saying that those who are sponsoring Islamic terrorism in Nigeria were some of the highest ranking officials of the federal government of Nigeria. This is the picture of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, let's look at President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's hesitation in declaring total war against the insurgents. The way President Bola Ahmed Tinubu ascended the presidential throne tended to create the impression that he had made a secret deal with the Fulani leadership in the north not to disturb the jihadist operations in Nigeria. As a result, President Tinubu seemed less concerned about the killings, especially in Benue, Enugu, Kaduna, Niger, Plateau, and Zamfara states. Even after herdsmen, jihadists killed over 200 people in Benue state, the president hesitated to declare total war against the herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists. Nigerians were disappointed by the speech he made when he went to Benue State to commiserate with the governor and peoples of the state over the killings of over 200 people. He said to the people, and I quote, "I was in Benue today. The scale of destruction and loss is heartbreaking. To the good people of Benue, I see your pain. I feel it with you, and I assure you we will not leave you behind. We will restore peace, rebuild, and bring justice. You are not alone," and I unquote. He advised the governor to work with all stakeholders to bring the conflict to an end. He did not promise to deploy the military fully to stop the incessant killings. President Tinubu's address to the Benue people after Fulani terrorists had killed over 200 people was eerily similar to the speech former President Buhari made to the same people after over 70 people were killed by herdsmen. He, that is former President Buhari, advised, and I quote, "Your Excellency, the governor, and all the leaders here, I am appealing to you to try to restrain your people. I assure you that the police, the Department of State Security, and other security agencies had been directed to ensure that all those behind the mayhem get punished. I ask you in the name of God to accommodate your countrymen. You can also be assured that I am just as worried and concerned with the situation," and I unquote. Again, President Buhari did not promise a full military operation against the herdsmen. Due to the strategic interests of the Islamic North, Nigeria refuses to arrest and prosecute sponsors of terrorism. Let's see how that goes. When the United Arab Emirates announced the arrest and prosecution of 6 Nigerians who sponsored terrorism in Nigeria, Nigerians expected the Nigerian government to follow suit and arrest the sponsors of terrorism in Nigeria. President Buhari refused to do so. When Nigerians mounted pressure, the federal government admitted that it has a list of 400 Nigerians who are responsible for sponsoring the jihadist violence. Yet, the Buhari administration refused to publish the list, arrest and prosecute the individuals. So nothing happened throughout President Buhari's administration. President Buhari left after completing 8 years in office as president. When Chief Bola Ahmed Tinubu became president, Nigerians expected him to take a different path. They expected him to publicly release the names of the sponsors of terrorism, arrest and prosecute them. President Tinubu has failed to do so. This indicates that the Islamic North, led by the Fulanis, dominates Nigeria. Hence, the country has not arrested and prosecuted those responsible for killing over 100,000 Nigerians. This means that no Nigerian leader can go contrary to the strategic interests of the Islamic North. This further means that President Tinubu is beholden to the Islamic North, hence he has not decided to enforce the law. It is the unwillingness of the ruling elites to do the needful that has forced the Nigerian armed forces to fold their arms and allow herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers and jihadists to run wild and destabilize the country. This is why the former 2 chiefs of defense staff insisted that the military cannot act with full force without political approval from the president of the country, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Now, let's look at the application of the Islamic concept of tajia to trick Nigerians into believing that there is no jihad. In Islam, the concept of tajia, which allows an opponent to be tricked or misled in order to achieve a goal, is permissible. Tajia is an obligation to lie to a non-Muslim. Therefore, it appears that when northern Islamic leaders in Nigeria discount the idea of a jihad to Fulanize and Islamize Nigeria, they are basically applying tajia to deceive non-Muslims about the true intention of the Fulani herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, Boko Haram, Islamic State of West Africa Province, Lakurawa, Ansaru, and the Mahmuda group. Lieutenant General Danjuma and Commodore Olawumi have warned. Now, this is U.S. reaction to those 6 individuals that the United Arab Emirates arrested. See, U.S. Department of the Treasury, press releases. Treasury sanctions 6 individuals for raising funds in the United Arab Emirates to support Nigeria's Boko Haram terrorist group. So even though Nigerian government refused to take action, the US government actually took action against those 6 individuals that were arrested by the United Arab Emirates, while Nigeria did nothing. Now, let's look at President Donald Trump's threat to send US military forces to clean the mess in Nigeria. While it is not in the strategic interests of Nigeria and Africa to encourage foreign military intervention, considering the mess in Iraq, Libya, and Syria. Nonetheless, President Trump's threat to intervene offers President Tinubu an opportunity to change the political dynamics in Nigeria. He should do the following to preempt intervention. 1. President Tinubu should declare a total war against terrorists to stop the killings of Nigerians. 2. Arrest and prosecute sponsors of terrorism in Nigeria. 3. Work toward restructuring Nigeria so that no single group can claim to own Nigeria. Nigeria belongs to all Nigerians. 4. Apply the law equally across the board, irrespective of tribe, ethnicity, region, and religion. And 5. Fight corruption unpretentiously. Conclusion. 1. The federal government of Nigeria is not able to fully mobilize the armed forces to fight and stop the armed herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, and jihadists because the leadership of the Islamic North allegedly supports the ongoing violence. 2. They view it as part of a strategy to conquer and Islamize Nigeria. Hence, Nigeria is experiencing a jihad. 3. They are able to impose their political will on what Nigeria can do and cannot do because they strongly believe that they own Nigeria. 4. Southern and central Nigerian leaders have bought into the view that the Islamic North owns Nigeria. Hence, they kowtow to the North in every aspect of political engagement in Nigeria. 5. This is why the law is applied differently between the Islamic North and the South and Central Nigeria. 6. Thus, the federal government does not want to arrest the sponsors of terrorism even though it knows them. The national government refuses to do so because the sponsors are some of the leaders of the Islamic North. 7. The armed forces of Nigeria are handicapped because those who wield political power in Nigeria do not want them to defeat the jihadists. 8. President Tinubu should use the possibility of American intervention as a leverage to mobilize the Nigerian armed forces to engage in total warfare with the jihadist groups. 9. He should also use the opportunity to tell the leaders of the Islamic North that the way of doing business in Nigeria must change. 10. He should restructure the country and rebuild the institutions of government. And 11. Fight corruption. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation. Please subscribe to the channel and listen to other very captivating presentations on different topics. Once again, thank you very much. Please do not fail to subscribe.